Broadcasting across the nation, on your radio, and on Current TV. This is the Bill Press Show.
President Obama telling graduates of Ohio State yesterday, get out there and become full-time activists, citizens fighting for the causes you believe in. That's a good message for all of us. Hey, good morning, everybody. What do you say? Good to see you today. Happy Monday. It is Monday, May 6, 2013, and here we are with another edition of the Full Court Press coming to you live from our nation's capital, our studio right here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. We're just down the street from the United States Capitol building. It's been pretty quiet there lately, but the Senate and the House come back in town tomorrow. We don't know whether that's good news or bad news, or whether you'll be able to tell the difference, because basically they get nothing done whether they're home or here. It doesn't matter. But it'll liven things up at any rate. Wherever it's happening, we've got it covered, whether it's the bombing in Syria over the weekend, a couple of airstrikes by Israel to thwart the delivery of some pretty dangerous missiles to the Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel didn't want to see that happen, and they took care of it ahead of time. Syria calls that an act of war. Yeah, but so is arming the Hezbollah an act of war. We got that covered, the politics here in this country, the news of the day, and with the help of a good friend, Eric Burns, who is one of the founding partners, of course, of Bullfight Strategies with Carl Frisch. Eric, good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Bill.
I've been in for a while. It's great to see you. Thanks. Yeah. And here's a friend of Bill the whole hour. So
that's right. I love that. I love that friend of Bill status. It gets me into restaurants.
It does not. It means Jack outside of this studio.
Come on, you guys have no idea. No idea.
He walks in and say, "Aren't you a friend of Bill?"
That's right.
The Cafe Milano will give you the best table in the house.
Chef's table.
There it is. Chef's table, right. And you're joining, of course, the entire team here. Well, not the entire team. Peter Ogburn heard you were coming in, so he took the day off. Dan Henning's leading up the team this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dan.
With Alicia Cruz on the phones, and Cyprian Balding gets a big wave. He is our video cam guy. So it was the big sports event, the fastest 2 minutes in sports, I know, right? Worldwide sports.
There's
the Kentucky Derby.
There's so much lead up to it, and then it's like over like that. You know, you go to the bathroom and you miss it. You know.
No, I know. We had some friends over the weekend, and we're sitting around, and somebody said, "Oh, isn't this time for the?" In fact, Carol said, "I want to see how the Nationals are doing." Turned on the TV, and what came up was the Kentucky Derby, and I'm telling you, all that build up, and then here's what it sounded like right at the end.
The outside. Is coming with giant strides in the center of the track, and here comes Orb on the outside to take the lead as they come down to the 16th pole. It is Orb in front from Normandy Invasion, My Loot, and Golden Soul between horses down to the wire. Orb has won the Kentucky Derby for Shubnagee. It was Golden Soul. Revolutionary came late on the inside, and then it was Normandy Invasion, and it was Orb. Today in the Derby, his final time was 2 minutes 2.89 seconds.
You know what?
I'm a little confused how that ended.
I think these guys practice all year long.
Oh, yeah. Well,
right? They have to for that 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, it's like when they score a goal in soccer, and there's a guy that, the goal guy, that's so famous. It's, it reminds me of that. But the names of some of these horses, Normandy Invasion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just the most outlandish names for these athlete horses, that you're fine because they have no say in the matter.
No, not at all. And the conditions, I mean, I saw that muddy track and I thought, man, there's going to be the horses down all over the place. But I don't know.
But it's an exciting 2 minutes.
It's a great 2 minutes.
For everybody.
Much like...
For everybody but the horse.
Yes, for everybody but the horse.
And the hats. The hats these women wear in the Kentucky Derby. It's like...
They take it very seriously, too.
It's like American royalty. The... what is it? The Royal Ascot or whatever that race is where the Queen always goes. And they
wear yes.
Outlandish.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And, Wimbledon's tennis.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's big. That and the mint juleps are the other big thing. It's the excuse to drink the mint juleps.
Right.
American royalty. That's generous.
For weeks, drinking the mint juleps, getting ready for that. I got a real problem with horse racing generally.
Sure.
Because these horses race and then they don't win, and they're off to the glue factory. Right?
Yeah, no, I know. It can be sad.
So Eric Burns is here as a friend of Bill. We'll also be joined a little bit later by reporters from Huffington Post and Politico. We'll bring you up to date on all that's happening. But first,
This
big
is the
stories of
Full
the day.
Court Press.
Other headlines making news on this Monday. Justin Bieber is not gay. But for a couple of minutes on Saturday, headlines to the contrary were news. E! Online's Twitter account was hacked and tweeted out that the teen pop star had come out. The account was shut down. It was determined E! was hacked by the so-called Syrian Electronic Army. They've also claimed responsibility for hacking the accounts of the Associated Press, NPR, Reuters, and 60 Minutes, among others.
The Syrian Electronic Army.
The Syrian Electronic Army
went after the E! Online.
Yes.
Like that.
Yep.
Wow.
That's what they call themselves.
No, but I mean, every day there's a story about somebody's account has been hacked.
Yeah.
It's big accounts.
Yeah.
And it's huge. They hacked the Associated Press and the stock market dipped 100 points.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at the White House when it was reported that 2 bombs had just gone off at the White House. I'm looking around. Where was I when these bombs went off?
It's serious stuff, but I guess these guys are really in Syria. They love the Biebs.
LeBron James was named the NBA's most valuable player for the 4th time in his young career yesterday, just at 28 years old, becoming the youngest player in basketball history to receive the award that many times. He's also got almost a unanimous vote, getting 120 out of 121 nods for the award. There has never been a unanimous vote for MVP. Only the second time that it was this close, Shaquille O'Neal in 2000 also got 120 out of 121.
He's won 4 times already, 28 years old.
Yeah, I read that and I thought, God, it really made me feel bad about myself and what I've achieved in my life.
By 28, it's pretty impressive. And controversy at the 9/11 Memorial Museum in New York City, where they have decided to charge an admission fee when it opens next year, anywhere between $20 and $25. The Huffington Post reporting entry to the Memorial Plaza and the reflecting pools will still be free, but families of the 9/11 victims are quite upset that they're charging this entrance fee to get in the building. They've been hit with heavy operating costs at $60 million a year to run the place, and this they see as a way to offset those costs.
I don't know about that. All I can tell you is Carol and I have been to the plaza and the reflecting pools. That is worth the trip. Very, very powerful. Very impressive. And whether the museum wasn't opened, obviously, when we were there.
Next year.
You could see they were working on it, but even if you can't afford the $25 to go to the museum, it's worth going down to Ground Zero to see that new memorial there. Thank you, Dan. Where do we start? Eric, let's start here. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a Democratic leader, speaking to a bunch of Democrats out in California over the weekend, had this is what she prays for every day.
I pray that Hillary Clinton decides to run for president of the United States. Let's set aside for a moment the fact that she is a woman. As a person, she will be the most qualified person to enter the White House in modern history.
Now that's kind of you could take it as maybe a little slap at Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and George Bush.
Sure.
But it's also true, isn't it?
No, it is. I mean, yeah.
And I don't want to start the Hillary Clinton, campaign right here. All I'm just saying is
it's already started, I think.
Yeah, right. I think it has. But
yeah, she's incredibly qualified. I mean, in a truly unique figure in American history, and especially in modern history. Now, I would say, look, George H.W. Bush was extremely qualified to be president. He had incredible credentials, akin to what the credentials that Richard Nixon brought into the White House. But, I think it's particularly, obviously important, the fact that Hillary Clinton would be the first woman to be elected, and she's so heavily favored.
I mean, you figure for former First Lady, former United States Senator, former Secretary of State of the United States.
Exceptional at all of them.
Exactly, right. Now, what's interesting to me is that parallel with this, the Emily's List on last Thursday held a big event here. We talked about it Friday on the show. They launched their own campaign called M-POTUS, which is to elect the first female president of the United States.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be Hillary. but should be a woman.
In case there's anyone else out there.
Right. Well, and there are.
Yes.
You know, you look at Kirsten Gillibrand, you look at Elizabeth Warren, right? You look at Dianne Feinstein, you look at Nancy Pelosi. I mean, there are a lot of incredibly talented women of both parties. You look at Olympia Snowe. You look at, I don't know, Nikki Haley from South Carolina, whose politics I deplore, but she's pretty effective, right?
But one of the interesting things is that the difference between the chances of those very well accomplished and serious women in the Republican Party getting their party's nomination, zero or close to zero. You actually have a very serious stable of folks on the left.
So do you think it could happen in 2016?
I think it will happen in 2016.
Will.
I really do. I just, look, it's a long way away and a lot happens, but my gosh, we're talking about Ted Cruz running, and I would love to see, frankly, I would love to see Vice President Joe Biden run if Hillary doesn't. I don't know that he would be able to beat her in a primary. That would be, or that he would even try, frankly.
I think if she runs, I think she will run. There will not be a primary.
And I would agree, and I think she will end up winning. I just don't see the Republican Party being in a position right now to be able to really mount a serious, a challenge to Hillary Clinton.
And when you think about all other countries, like now we have a female president of Korea. I couldn't tell you her name, Angela Merkel, right? And of course, in Germany, go on and on over the years, just buried Maggie Thatcher. That the United States has never had a woman in the White House, either as president or vice president.
It's long past time.
Yeah.
And the great part is this is not a token. This would not be a token, candidacy or campaign. She is exceptionally well qualified.
Of course, we could have had Sarah Palin, but
I think
but
Sarah
you do
Palin
have to have some qualifications other than being a woman, right?
Well, yes, that's right. A Sarah Palin Rick Perry ticket. After seeing them on Friday in Houston, I feel like maybe they were separated at birth, perhaps. Because they both have the absurd hair and the bad W impressions.
All right, so give us again. You former Texas Republican.
Yeah, we talk about this every time.
I want you to apologize again for your past, but also, is there any shot? Yeah. So here's the NRA. Where are they going to have their convention? They're going to have it, in the heartland, right, where they are welcomed with open arms. Yes. Houston, Texas, right down there with all that rhetoric. You'll never take our guns away. And Rick Perry coming by saying we don't need any gun reform down here. Sarah Palin giving the keynote address. Is there any hope for Texas? Will Texas ever turn blue?
Yes, Texas will turn blue. And I'll tell you, look, there is a big gun culture in Texas, like you see in a lot of western and southern states, and even up in the Midwest. But Houston is a Democratic city. Democrat. We actually the first lesbian mayor in America is currently the mayor of Houston, Texas, right now, Anise Parker. Dallas is a Democratic city. Austin is a Democratic city. San Antonio, Democratic city, and you have.
Why do they keep electing people like Ted Cruz?
Well, because there is just no infrastructure in Texas. The party infrastructure has been very weak for a long, long time. You don't have the political infrastructure that you have in Ohio, for instance, on the left, but that's changing. And so we are actually seeing some investment in infrastructure. People are really starting to understand that Texas, could be blue. I would say it could have been blue actually a couple of years ago. In 2006, my former boss ran for governor, Chris Bell, and the internals that we had, showed that in June before the election, he was within 5 points of Rick Perry. But unfortunately, at that point, Kinky Friedman was in the race, Carol Strayhorn was in the race, and so it just kind of split up the opposition.
I think, Eric, your job is going to be going back to Texas and running for office.
Or running someone for office, but I will apologize. I apologize for being a Republican, but I will tell you, I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago. We don't hold that against you. Just as long as you can make up for it by turning Texas blue.
I'm working on it.
All right. Now, tomorrow, big primary in South Carolina. It's Elizabeth Colbert Bush versus Mark Sanford. There's some similarities between South Carolina and Texas, maybe, but are the South Carolinians
Texans
going to be
are bristling at that?
Yeah, are you going to be as forgiving as the people of South Carolina? I mean, do you think they'll bring back Mark Sanford, or finally say enough's enough?
I really hope not. I mean, you just at some point you just gotta say, man, enough is enough, and it's not even about whether or not he's in league with these just kind of absurd radical right wingers like Ted Cruz types that we see, or the Tea Party. It's not even about that. It's just about the sliminess, I think, that he kind of exhibited when he was governor. Really speaks volumes. And Elizabeth Colbert Bush, a very exciting candidate. It would be really, really exciting to see something and see her pull this out in South Carolina.
And the latest polls we've seen, she is ahead, and he looks like he's getting desperate. That's going to be a big bellwether race, I think, tomorrow in South Carolina.
Absolutely.
And when we come back here, your comments on any we've been talking about here, Hillary Clinton, Texas turning blue, 866-55-PRESS. When we come back, Howie Kurtz from CNN, reliable sources, spent a lot of time yesterday apologizing. Did he do it well enough to keep his job at CNN? 866-55-PRESS. We'll be right back.
Heard around the country and seen on current TV. This is the Bill Press Show. Like politics? Then like The Bill Press Show on Facebook. This is The Bill Press Show.
26 minutes after the hour, the Constitutional Accountability Center reports that the John Roberts Court, surprise, surprise, the most pro-business, pro-Chamber of Commerce court in history. Tom Donnelly from the center will be joining us, meaning Eric Burns and me, and the next segment to talk about that. Eric Burns here as a friend to Bill. So, Eric, Howie Kurtz fired by the Daily Beast yesterday. He's the Washington bureau chief for Daily Beast, and Newsweek. Fired because he wrote this column complaining about the fact that Jason Collins, when he came out as a gay NBA player, did not reveal that he had once been engaged to a woman, when in fact he had. In his interview with Sports Illustrated, Howie Kurtz was wrong. He now admits he was wrong, but he was fired by Tina Brown at Daily Beast. And yesterday on reliable sources at CNN, he spent a lot of time apologizing.
Yes, he
it
did.
would never happen again. Do you think he's going to hold on to his job at CNN, or should?
I think he will, because ultimately, because he actually didn't do the non-apology apology that we see from so many media folks that get in trouble. He's been doing this long enough as like the media critic of record that he actually just laid it out there. This was wrong. My judgment was bad. I'm going to do better, and I apologize, which is what you have to do in those situations to survive. I think that, look, CNN is a network in crisis, and Howard Kurtz, to say the least, but Howard Kurtz is that's the only national, media show, on cable in the country. It's kind of the definitive, media show, and so I think he's got a shot to keep that show, but he's going to have to really step up his game and maybe not be involved in 9 other projects at once.
Reliable sources, of course, the name of the show. Howie Kurtz has been hosting it for the last 10 years, I guess, at least. Right. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think he genuinely regrets what he did. He knows that he read the Sports Illustrated article too fast.
Yes.
Missed it the first time around, and then wrote his column without going back to recheck it. Didn't call Jason Collins for a comment. But I think he's cleared the air and keep his job.
This is the Bill Press Show. Chatting with you live at current.com/BillPress. This is the Bill Press Show, live on your radio and Current TV.
Hey, here we go. 33 minutes after the hour now on a Monday, May 6th. Good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. Eric Burns is here as a friend of Bill from Bullfight Strategies.
Hello.
Good to have you in studio,
Always
Eric,
good to
again.
be here.
It's been a while. And we're joined now by Tom Donnelly, who is the message director and counsel for the Constitutional Accountability Center. Hey, Tom, good to see you.
Good to see you, Bill.
We, you hear the phrase, Eric's here is a friend of Bill. And you hear the phrase friend of the court when people file a brief in front of the Supreme Court. The Constitutional Accountability Center has been looking at the John Roberts Court and find out that they really deserve the title friend of the corporation because they are, you find, the most business-friendly court in the history of the Supreme Court, right?
Well, I mean, certainly our study looks at three successive courts, the Berger Court, the Rehnquist Court, and the Roberts Court. And what we see is a steady progression where the chamber is becoming more successful before the Supreme Court over time, and that the highest number is the Roberts Court.
So the Chamber of Commerce interceding as a friend of the court in case after case after case?
Exactly.
And the Roberts Court, what, just basically open arms to almost anything they want to be part of? Or?
Well, I mean, in the end, over the course of John Roberts' time as Chief Justice, and when Sam Alito also joined the court, the chamber wins 69% of the cases in which it files a brief. So it wins the vast majority of those cases. If you were to look at
so it wins 69% of the cases in which it intervenes.
Yes.
Whoa.
Oh yes.
69. Yeah. Who else comes close?
I'm not sure. We haven't looked at sort of every group, but I mean that's a staggering number. I mean the other thing to understand, Bill.
Well, put it this way: if they're winning 69%, nobody else is coming close, right? I mean, do the arithmetic,
do the math, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean the other thing to understand, Bill, is that over time the chamber is also participating in a higher percentage of the cases before the court per term. So if you were to look at the period just before Justice Scalia joined the court. They were only participating in about 4% of the cases per term, whereas now, this particular term, the chamber is participating in 24% of the cases before the court. So what we're seeing is a very business-heavy docket, and the Chamber of Commerce, when they intercede, are winning the vast majority of those cases.
So it also means, obviously, that the court is taking more and more cases that the business community has an interest in.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? As opposed to consumers or unions or working class citizens, whatever.
And at the same,
they're driving the court's docket.
Yes,
it sounds like.
And at the same time, this court, the Roberts Court, is taking fewer cases than any court that we know of in kind of previous recent history. So, I think that even kind of adds to the outsized influence that we see the Chamber of Commerce having.
So the number of cases that the court is taking is lower, right?
Yes.
But the percentage of business-related cases is higher.
Exactly.
And
which, as you say, just compounds their influence.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing about this bill is it's not just the chamber coming in and participating in cases that the court has already decided to take. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce has made a concerted effort to file briefs at the stage when the court's deciding which cases to take. And so what you have is the chamber selecting certain opinions from lower courts and saying, the corporations or the business there really got hurt. It's a good set of facts. We want to take this case before the Supreme Court and move the law in a pro-business direction. So it's a conscious effort to shape what's actually on the docket.
To drive the agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah, to shape the docket. And how does it break down in terms of the justices themselves? If the entire court is, but is it one side or the other that proves to be, I don't want to take for granted.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, what you really want to look at here, Bill, is so there are some cases that are legally easier, and so these are sometimes come out unanimously or with a lopsided majority, and sometimes the progressive justices actually decide in favor of the chamber as well. But if you look at the cases that are decided 5-4, the really close ones, the Citizens Uniteds of the world, what ends up happening is that the conservative justices side with the chamber side 82% of the time. And so these are where the vote really matters.
When it comes down to one vote.
Exactly.
Difference. And that includes John Roberts, the Mr. Chief Justice.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I mean, there was a very long, very good article in the New York Times this past weekend on all of this. And so I suggested by Adam Liptak. Exactly.
Right. Friend of the corporation.
Yeah.
Which lays it all out and has a whole list of different cases and everything to, proving your point, I'm sure, built on a large part your report. I just want to come back to those numbers. So they win the chamber wins 69% of the cases that they get involved in. and the conservatives vote with them 82% of the time. Is that what you?
82% of the time in the 5-4 or 5-3 decisions, where it's really on the knife's edge.
Yeah. So you're sure if you're big business that you're going to get Scalia's vote, Thomas's vote, Alito's vote, Roberts' vote, and probably Anthony Kennedy.
And I would even add,
right?
Not literally every case, but you have a pretty darn good chance of getting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you consider, what Tom is saying, and then, consider the fact that Anthony Scalia was sitting next to Bill O'Reilly at the White House Correspondents' Center recently. He regularly goes out and, pals around with folks at the Heritage Foundation and has relationships, as do, the conservative justices on the court, often very publicly, with a lot of these conservative think tanks, and advocacy groups like the Chamber of Commerce.
866-55-PRESS is our toll-free number if you have a comment on the Supreme Court. And it's pro-business leanings, particularly under the Roberts Court. So this has gotten progressively worse, is the other point among the Roberts, so that the Roberts Court now is the court that's most in the pockets of big business of any we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah, no, so they're sort
no
of...
doubt, right?
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah, so I mean, like, our study looks at the court most recently. There was another longer academic report that recently came out in the Minnesota Law Review, which, among other people, was actually one of the people that wrote the report was Judge Richard Posner, who's a famous conservative judge appointed by Ronald Reagan. And what they wound up finding was that if you go all the way back to 1946, that the Roberts Court is the most pro-business court during that period, and that if you were to look at all 36 justices during that period, that Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Alito were the most pro-business justices of that entire period. So you're seeing just, it moving, very much so in a pro-business direction.
Thank you, George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And who says Supreme Court appointees don't really make a big difference, or who said, right, it doesn't matter which party gets the presidency because... Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like this has kind of become the proxy, when we see conservatives in the Republican Party losing, their clout either in the White House or in the Congress, and they're not passing their agenda. Well, this is kind of like their proxy. They can try to take stuff over and move it through the court.
All right.
And they've built a huge infrastructure
All
to
right,
do
so
that.
Tom, let me ask you then, the one case, I guess, that we know of that pops into mind right away is the most pro-business decision must be Citizens United. Is that correct?
I mean, it sure seems to have made a big difference, and yes, that's a chamber case, pro-business, 5-4, 5-justice conservative bloc majority, huge deal.
Which gives them, of course, the right to that corporations are citizens. They can spend as much money as they want in any political campaign.
Pretty much.
The essence of it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay. What are some of the other pro-business decisions?
So I mean, just to even apart from an individual case, I mean, what's usually at stake in these cases are, whether consumers can come and bring their claims if they think that a company's committed fraud, whether employees can, collectively come together and bring discrimination suits against their employers. I mean, these are stripped of the legalese. These cases can be pretty boring to read on an individual basis, but stripped of the legalese, it really matters to consumers and employees.
Yeah.
The most sort of below the radar but important case before the court this past term was a case called Comcast Corp versus Barron. Mm-hmm. And so this is a bunch of 2 million cable customers in the Philadelphia media market bringing an antitrust claim against Comcast, pretty much claiming that, because of these antitrust practices, the prices of their cable packages went up. And they actually won in the trial court, they won in the Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court granted the case, and then pretty much throughout the entire suit. And effectively, again, made it more difficult for individual people claiming some abuse from a corporation or company to actually come into court collectively in a class action and try to hold them accountable.
So the consumers had won all the way up to the Supreme Court?
On the question of whether they... So this wasn't even just about the merits of the case. This is whether or not they can just bring the class action to begin with.
Yeah.
And so it's the first stage of litigation, and the Supreme Court said, no, it's going to be more difficult for you to convince us that you should be able to come together as a class action and hold Comcast accountable.
And Tom, wasn't it on kind of a technicality that Scalia wrote the majority opinion, around like that they didn't tie the class to the to the damages or something to that effect?
Yes, and I mean what was extraordinary about the case is that Justices Breyer and Ginsburg, two of the progressive justices, actually wrote a very spirited dissent and also read their dissent from the bench, which only happens a few times a year for each justice, and they really reserve that for a moment when they think something really bad has happened. And here they accuse the conservative majority of essentially rewriting the question presented a couple of times, the legal issue that the court's supposed to decide, in such a way that disadvantaged the consumers in this case.
I drove by the Supreme Court yesterday. I didn't notice that sign, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, over the top of it, but maybe...
owned and operated by?
Yeah, owned and operated by. Maybe that's what's missing now. But the Constitutional Accountability Center, they've taken the mask away, ripped off the mask here with this latest study. Tom Donnelly, Message Director and Counsel's in studio with us with Eric Burns. We're talking about it, and we'd be glad to invite you to join the conversation. 866-55-PRESS. We'll be right back on the Full Court Press.
Heard around the country and seen on current TV, this is the Bill Press Show. Get social with Bill Press. Like us at facebook.com/Bill Press Show. This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, 12 minutes before the top of the hour, talking about the Roberts Court, the most pro-business friendly court that we have seen in our lifetime. We'll get back to our conversation about that and take your calls. But first, here again, a story about identity theft everywhere out in California. California man discovered somebody had charged over $3,000 for online purchases in his name. He's also received credit cards in the mail that he hadn't applied for, and discovered that charges had already been made to those accounts. Identity theft is everywhere. You should be protected against it. I am with LifeLock Ultimate, the most comprehensive ID theft protection ever made. But of course, LifeLock can't protect you or your bank account if you're not a member. I encourage you to visit lifelock.com or call and mention Press 10 for 10% off your LifeLock Ultimate membership. Call 1-800-356-5967, 1-800-356-5967. That's 1-800-356-5967. Network does not cover all transactions, and the scope may vary. Bank account takeover alerts require LifeLock Ultimate membership. There you go. So Tom Donnelly's here again from the Constitutional Accountability Center, which works with Bullfight Strategies, or Bullfight Strategies is working with them. I know one or
These
the
guys
other.
We work with them. They're one of our clients. So,
all right. But it's good to have you here, Tom, despite the fact that you work with this guy.
I know. Don't hold it against me.
Right. We were talking about the Citizens United case. There are also some cases related to pay equity. Walmart case particularly comes to mind. The New York Times talked about that. What was that case all about?
Yeah, so this was a bunch of female employees at Walmart trying to come together and bring a class action lawsuit, claiming that they're not getting paid as much as men and they're not being...
a classic case.
Not being promoted as much as men.
Yeah.
And the court again said, maybe individually you might have a claim here, but you're going to have to prove a whole lot in order to be able to join together as a class. And again, it's those class actions that are really important to give large-scale relief, to get companies to change their policies, and often just to have anyone even bring a lawsuit to hold them accountable to begin with.
And the court ruled...
The court threw out the case, saying that there were not enough common issues between these employees, because essentially Walmart delegated so much of the supervisory authority to individual managers, and so far, and so the court effectively, it's a lot like Comcast said, you might be able to bring an individual claim, but you can't bring this together in a large-scale lawsuit.
Well, this has been happening for a long time, Eric. Why don't we hear more about this? Why is this just coming out?
I was So I mean, I wanted to make that point. It's a good question. It's a question that I have, frankly, because we have this great New York Times story. We're talking about it here this morning. I think there was another story on MSNBC.com. But generally speaking, historically, this is not something that the mainstream press likes to cover. I think maybe it's a little too dense. Perhaps a lot of these media companies, it's because they're owned by big corporations that are owned by big corporations that perhaps have interests. But I think it's something that the media in this country, as a former media critic myself, need to get serious about covering, because this is really affecting the lives of Americans very directly.
The court gets a lot of attention, and we talk about court issues here, but I've never heard anyone raise this issue about the court, which I find really stunning. Again, that 69% of the cases the chamber gets involved in, that they win with this Roberts court. And hearing you talk about it, Tom, it reminds me more and more of the way Congress operates. I mean, where the big business lobbyists win the day every time, just about. Well, not entirely, but
and I mean, it's.
So is this what you have? I mean, this is the equivalent of lobbyists lobbying the Supreme Court, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's a reminder more than anything that elections matter and courts matter, and that getting justices who are going to really, in this case, apply the laws as it was intended to be applied, rather than finding ways, whether it's through procedural quirks like in the Comcast case, or like what they did in Citizens United, to really rule in a pro-business way.
I mean, it seems like people. I don't think Americans really understand. We think of the Supreme Court as kind of being, these noble justices on a hill above the fray. It's what it's supposed to be. But I don't think that's not the case anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. The conservatives, I think, since 1971 or 72, have had written plans, just like we've seen in so many other times. We've even talked about this kind of stuff. A written strategy that they were going to, on how they're going to influence the court, and they've been incredibly successful at it over the last. Well,
what it looks to me like, if you got a case, so the case comes in, and the first thing that Antonin Scalia and Samuel Alito and these other guys look for, and Clarence Thomas, is let's see who's on this side, who's on which side of this case. And if they see the Chamber of Commerce on one side of this case, automatically it gets their vote.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what often happens too is, even if they're looking at which cases to take, that often, and there is scholarship that suggests that those sorts of things make a difference. That those reputational, the cues that a particular interest group thinks this case is important enough, the justices are at least going to give it a closer look.
So they've got the voice, and too many of us do not have the voice, and now we know more about it. Big thanks to the Constitutional Accountability Center. Tom Donnelly, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks, Bill. My pleasure.
And Eric Burns, good to have you around, man. Come back again soon.
It's great. Thank you. Always goes by too fast.
And I'll tell you about the president's busy schedule today coming up next.
This is the Bill Press Show.